Monitoring all morning long this tragedy right over the Potomac River outside of Reagan Airport, where a plane flying in from Wichita collided moments before landing with a Black Hawk helicopter. The latest report last hour from officials in Washington, D.C., no survivors are expected. They have moved from rescue to recovery mode, and the airport is going to open back up later this morning, 11 o'clock local time. Already one flight out of KCI has been canceled. The only flight that was scheduled to leave for DCA this morning on Southwest has been canceled. That flight was scheduled for 8:10 this morning. So be sure to check on the airlines as you're heading up to KCI this morning. Let's now say hello and good morning to Mayor Quinton Lucas on 95.7 FM and streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Mr. Mayor, I know you've done that flight probably more times than you can count. So what are you thinking this morning?
First of all, my condolences to the victims. It touches closer to home. Most of us in this region have been in Wichita. I kind of lived in that area for an earlier part of my life. So thinking about that community and the many people who are touched by it. As I was thinking about our hit this morning, some people were criticizing President Trump because I know last night he went on Truth Social and said some things that were pretty direct, like this is preventable and this should not have happened. And this is one time where I'll say he is absolutely right. And this is one space where I absolutely appreciate what is his quick response. I was just talking to my wife about it. There should not in any way be a helicopter aircraft collision on a flight route into Reagan National Airport. The airport's been there for 90 years. That flight route is steady. You are right. I've done it a ton of times. It is truly more times than I can count. Kansas City businessmen and women, tourists going out to Washington, people trying to just see their nation's capital do it all the time from Kansas City and places like Wichita. And, I hope they get to the bottom of this very quickly. I hope we understand why, from at least the account I heard in the press conference, there was a Black Hawk helicopter that might have even been in a bit of a training operation that was on that route. I have seen choppers over the Potomac many times, but, as far as I see it, frankly, you need Marine One flying over Washington to get the president in and out. Maybe the vice president needs one, but otherwise, I don't know why you have a bunch of people that are crossing incredibly busy flight routes. There are 67 people who should be alive today, and I hope our government gets to the bottom of it very quickly.
As someone who has dealt with tragedy and, stories that garner worldwide attention in this town, Muriel Bowser, the Washington, D.C. mayor, held this press conference last hour. What would you say to her when you're suddenly the mayor of a city that is at the center of an international story?
They did it right. What they did, and I was able to watch and listen to all of it, was she led, I believe it was a fire chief or an airport official who shared the sad news that they expect no survivors. And I think she gave space for everyone else who was in the press conference. This is a small point and perhaps a seemingly petty one, but I saw someone mention this online, and I agree. I wish the American Airlines CEO had the time to put on a suit or something like that when we're dealing with this tragedy that's going to change a number of lives. I usually wear one out of respect for people. You didn't see me in a Chiefs jersey after the parade shooting last year. But, casting that to the side, I think the Secretary of Transportation, I think the officials there responded as thoroughly as they could and should have. I appreciate the two senators from Virginia who did note that they will very quickly get to the bottom of it. We can't be paralyzed for it. I hope, frankly, this is one change we see in our federal government. A lot of times we have things happen and we say, all right, yeah, we'll look into it. And then 3.5 years later, you hear some report and it seems like no one is held to account. I hope that we very quickly do so. I think the families are owed this. I think everyone is owed this. And I was thinking about it this morning. If my wife and kids, and my wife actually has family in the D.C. area, if my wife and sons were on a flight to D.C. and something like this happened, I'd be plenty hot. And I think we owe it to people to find a way to make sure something like this never happens again.
What's the thing? I mean, with the city, of course, overseeing KCI, I don't expect you to be the transportation expert here, but in managing an airport of this size, what is the biggest hurdle right now that you think cities and air traffic control in general faces when it comes to making sure people are safe on these flights all over the country?
I think there is always a hiring issue, and that is something that you're catching in every public position in America. And so making sure you have enough air traffic controllers. There is a consistent challenge, and, this was perhaps a unique incident, but it's something that we see sometimes, which is different sized planes in fields and that sort of thing, and helicopters being thrown into the mix. That becomes more of a downtown airport issue for us, but that starts to create more challenge for us. And then certainly where you have a nearby either military installation, or certainly in Washington where you just have a lot of military aircraft, that presents even more issues. In my dream world, right, we'd just have a ton of 737s, the exact same plane, taking off all the time and doing what have you. But, keeping track of those other challenges, having air traffic controllers who note it and speak up and make a difference on it, I know that will be investigated too. Avoiding drones in this modern enterprise. I mean, those are a lot of things. But I'll say this for the FAA with the greatest respect, and I know we'll have new leadership there soon. When Kansas City was trying to build, I think, an 8-story apartment building on the river market, we ran into a world of different concerns, and they were saying, well, there's a training flight route and all that sort of stuff, and went back and forth for a long time. And for the love of Pete, we got a bunch of helicopters just traversing the Potomac all the darn time with commercial airlines, crossing the same routes. I mean, my goodness, maybe, look back at headquarters out your window and see what types of changes you can make. So I would think that both here in Washington, certainly at LaGuardia Airport, New York, others where you have these busy routes, I hope that you see some clarity as to the priority of these flight routes, making sure that people can be safer. In Kansas City, fortunately, we don't deal with that as much.
Kansas City Mayor Quinton Lucas is on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM, always streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. I do want to pivot, Mr. Mayor. The State of the State came this week from a new Missouri Governor, Mike Kehoe, and the Kansas City Star had a headline, Missouri's new governor wants to keep the Chiefs and the Royals. How he plans to do it is a mystery. And I just said, listen, I think it's a mystery because, as you've alluded to on the show, no one really knows what the teams want. So how can you help them with something that they haven't given you any information on? Is that where you're at this morning?
I think that's 100% right. I mean, I read a separate piece in the Star where I think there was actually a Democratic representative who was saying, well, Kansas City needs to tell us what they need for these teams. And I'm like, well, the teams really do have to make clear what their ask is. We are certainly going to try to do the work to make sure they're courted, they're appreciated, they're respected. I think Governor Kehoe has said that any number of times. But, if you're a local government actor or a state government actor, you have a duty to the taxpayers above all else to make sure that you're spending money responsibly, that you're not just saying, all right, yeah, here's an open checkbook, write whatever you want. You want to make sure it's based on the need of what the teams are presenting themselves as needing to build and create. We continue to have positive chats with all of them, but that's going to be more of what I think the focus is, rather than us just saying, we're going to throw out $5 billion to build something that competes with SoFi Stadium. That would not be responsible. I don't think your listeners or listeners down the dial on KCUR and everyone in between would appreciate such a thing. So we'll keep those chats going. But, it does necessitate at a certain point the team saying, all right, this is our vision for what we will be well into the future. And importantly, this is the commitment that we will put up. Neither in Missouri nor Kansas, frankly, have you heard that clarity of discussion. And I think wherever they end up, and wherever they end up in the country, mind you, I hope they stay here, but wherever they would end up, that's what taxpayers are owed, and that's what I think people should expect.
The Royals seem like the team that more people are waiting on right now because there's just more options for them, or at least there have been rumors of more options for them. Is there any meeting, or are you just kind of sitting by your phone? I mean, you've got plenty to do, but are you kind of just sitting by the phone saying, hey, if they want to call me, they know how to get a hold of me?
I'm not that stubborn, but, I think that I do feel newly liberated in this new presidential administration to say what I want. And I think what I would say, is this, that we expect this to be a collaborative conversation and a two-way street. It is not 1969 where you electively build stadiums and hope somebody comes. Frankly, that was part of the challenge even with St. Louis when they got the Rams. I think what you have to try to do is say, all right, what's the deal that we need? What works best? I think another thing, if I can just be the straight talk express with you, is part of the reason that the Royals are such a strong part of this conversation, the Chiefs aren't, and I agree with the 76,000 people who were there on Sunday, is Arrowhead Stadium's an amazing stadium. It's an amazing stadium. It had the biggest performer in the world in Taylor Swift a year ago or 2 years ago, and another darn big one in Beyonce Knowles. They're hosting huge events. It's making tons of money. It is a great venue, and when you look at games in other venues, the only difference is, frankly, that they have a bigger jumbotron. Now, I know there may be some stadium expert who says, no, Mayor Lucas, the suite's going to be this level of difference and what have you. But you know what? I've been questioned on this show and attacked in the press for going to a bunch of games. I've been to a lot of suites in a lot of places. And frankly, I think we measure up pretty well. So the real story is everybody needs to figure out a deal that helps improve Arrowhead Stadium for another generation, that puts good money there. You have a giant parking lot. You have a great setup. The highways are even built to support it. That's a step one. And I guess if I'm going to be the guy who says that for everybody, I'll do it. And then for the Royals, I think the clarity is it's their business model that they need to have a stadium in a more dense spot. I had lunch with dinner with somebody in Overland Park the other day who lives off 133rd and all, and said, why the heck would you put a baseball stadium up at 119? So I'll leave that to the side because I haven't heard the clamoring from the people of Overland Park necessarily wanting it near them. And so that says if you're looking at that downtown site, let's get it figured out, what the cost is, do our studies, and get this done. We all have a lot of stuff to do. We owe it to our taxpayers to talk about roads and public safety and all of that, not just stadiums for another 4 years.
Well, I'll take your straight talk and one-up it because that's what I have to do 4 hours a day. The 119th idea is possibly the stupidest idea I have ever heard of. So that is very true.
And you know what? I'll say this on Pete, too. For me, it's not even a Missouri-Kansas battle. I'm with you. Like, look, I get it. If they want to build out by the Legends and they have a good Star Bonds deal, I won't love it, but, like, I get the play. 119th and all, it makes no sense. Nobody who just bought a $900,000 house down the street wants to have a giant stadium and lights on 81 nights a year, and you disrupt everything that already exists there. It's crazy. And so I hope we can have some clarity in where we're going, and I think that helps the conversation along.
Yeah, nothing like zigzagging down Antioch or Metcalf for 3 hours to get to 435. It sounds like a great time. Mr. Mayor, thank you as always. We appreciate your thoughts on a obviously tragic day for the region, for the country as well, and we'll talk to you next week. Have a great day.
Hey, thank you. Take care, everybody.
All right, there you go. Quinton Lucas on KCMO 95.7 FM.